I had assembled a grand Christmas party that cost me $3,000 and invited 30 of my closest family members. But when the time came, not a single person showed up. Instead, I found out they were all gathered at my brother's house, laughing and having a good time as if I never existed. That was the final straw after 28 years of being mistreated by my family. But luckily, there was one person who saw everything, my grandfather. And the decision he made in the days that followed completely changed my life and forced the entire family to pay a heavy price for the way they treated me. The story I'm about to tell might make you think I'm being cruel, but hear me out, and you can decide who the real villain is. Hello, everyone. My name is Naomi. I'm 28 years old and currently the head of sales at a major real estate company based in Austin, Texas. From the outside looking in, you'd probably think I have it all. A stable six-figure job, a luxury apartment overlooking the Colorado River, and the youth to enjoy it all. But behind that picture of success, I live alone in a 15th floor apartment in East Austin, a place I bought just 3 months ago for one reason: to escape my toxic family and a bunch of greedy relatives. It might sound harsh to call my family toxic, right? But once you hear my whole story, you'll understand why I had to make that painful decision. My story took place 7 months ago during last year's Christmas season. At the time, it felt like the happiest moment of my career. After 3 years of working tirelessly at the company, I was finally promoted to head of sales, a position I had dreamed about for a long time. The moment I got the official notice from the board, I was overwhelmed with emotion. My new salary had crossed the six-figure mark, and with it came limitless opportunities for advancement. I had proven my worth and capabilities for the first time. Caught up in that excitement, an idea suddenly came to me. I should throw a Christmas party at my place to share this joy with my family and relatives. Deep down, I knew my relationship with the family wasn't exactly smooth, but I saw this as a chance to show them how far I'd come, a way to express my growth and success. After thinking it through for 3 days, I decided to host the family Christmas party that year. 1 week before Christmas, I started making calls to invite everyone. The first call was to Aunt Sophia. My voice was excited as I asked her to the party at my home. As soon as Aunt Sophia said she'd come, I moved on to Uncle Robert and my cousins. Interestingly, I never mentioned the promotion. I wanted that to be a surprise, something I'd share in the warmth and togetherness of the evening. The responses from everyone honestly took me by surprise, in a good way. Everyone sounded excited and eager to come. Aunt Maria promised to bring her famous cheesecake. Uncle Thompson said he'd be there with his family, including his 3 little kids. Even some of the more distant relatives I barely kept in touch with confirmed they'd make time to attend. After my last call, I sat down and counted the confirmed guests. Nearly 30 people said they were coming. That number was way more than I ever expected. At that moment, I felt like a kid counting down to her birthday. After I finished inviting the relatives, I finally made the calls to my parents and my older brother, Brian. I spent a lot of time debating whether I should ask them. Brian was their pride and joy, the golden child in my family. As I sat there staring at my guest list, I hesitated over the last 3 names: Dad, Mom, Brian. I knew it would be seen as a primary offense if I left them out. They'd accuse me of disrespecting the family. In the end, I decided to invite them. I called Dad first. When I mentioned the party, he responded in his usual dry tone, "Why aren't you having it at your parents' house?" Then I called Mom. Her reaction wasn't much better. She replied vaguely, "I don't know yet. If I have time, I might stop by." The last call was to Brian. After hearing the invitation, he asked skeptically, "You're hosting it at your place? Do you even have enough space and stuff to keep everyone entertained?" After those calls, I felt uneasy and unsure. Their cold responses brought back a flood of unpleasant childhood memories. Brian is 2 years older than I am. Ever since we were kids, our parents showed blatant favoritism toward him. You could see it in all the little details of daily life. He always got new stuff while I had to use his hand-me-downs: books, school supplies, even his old bike, laptop, and later on his clothes. I still remember our birthday celebrations. Every year, Brian's birthday was a full-blown event. Our parents would invite all his friends, order a custom cake from a fancy bakery, and get him expensive gifts, from the latest gaming consoles to high-end sports gear. In contrast, my birthdays were just quiet family dinners. No decorations, no friends, just a store-bought cake and a few small presents. When I once asked why my birthdays weren't like Brian's, Mom always said, "You don't have as many friends as Brian. Besides, you're not into noisy crowds." The favoritism became even clearer when it came to school. I worked hard and consistently got straight A's while Brian only managed average grades. Instead of praising me, our parents would excuse him. "Brian's busy with extracurriculars. He doesn't have time to study." Every time Brian brought home a poor report card, they'd find a way to justify it. But the one time I got a B in chemistry, they questioned why I wasn't trying harder. That unfair treatment became deeply rooted in me from a young age. Brian had a way with words. He always knew how to say the right things to make people happy, especially Mom, Dad, and our relatives. Whenever someone visited, he'd show up with a big smile, ask about their health, compliment the aunts on their outfits, or remember everyone's birthday. Those little gestures made everyone love him. Thanks to all that praise, my parents spent tens of thousands of dollars on Brian over the years. When he wanted to attend an expensive private school, they didn't hesitate. When he tried to join a summer trip to Europe, they forked out 15 grand without blinking. But me? I was the quiet one. I liked books and preferred being alone. That only made my parents compare us even more. "Why can't you be more like Brian? Why don't you know how to talk to people like he does?" They said no when I asked them to pay for a summer coding course that cost $3,000. Why bother with coding? You should focus on your regular schoolwork. Sitting there in silence after those phone calls, I couldn't help but wonder if I had made a mistake inviting them. But then I thought, maybe this was my chance to prove something, to show them that I too could be successful, that I wasn't the failure they'd always seen me as, and I threw the most unforgettable party to show them how far I had come. Even though I had invited everyone else, there was still one name on my list I hadn't called yet, my grandfather, David. When I saw his name, I decided I wouldn't call him like the others. The next day after work, I drove from Austin to Rollingwood, a quiet area about 20 minutes away. I carried a bottle of premium Kentucky bourbon, which I knew he loved. It wasn't just a gift, it was my way of showing love and gratitude. As soon as I pulled up in front of his warm wooden house, I saw him waiting on the porch. Even at 80 years old, my grandfather was impressively strong and sharp. He still cared for himself and never needed help from anyone in the family. He had Grace by his side these days, a housekeeper who had been with our family for nearly 10 years. But Grace was more than help. She was his companion. She handled the heavy tasks like cleaning and shopping and sometimes kept him company during quiet evenings. When he saw me, his eyes lit up with a warm smile I always missed. He hugged me tightly like we hadn't seen each other in months, even though I had just visited him 2 weeks ago. A little later, we sat down on the porch in the same spot where he usually read the morning paper. When I told him I'd been promoted to head of sales, his face lit up with pride. Right then, he placed his hand gently on my head and gave it a soft rub, a gesture he'd done since I was a kid. With a voice full of emotion and sincerity, he said, "Naomi, I'm truly proud of you. I always knew you were going to do great things." After that, I invited him to my Christmas party. As soon as I mentioned it, he smiled and said he'd be there. No hesitation, no questions, just pure support. Before I left, he stood beside my car window and said, "I'll be there, and I'm bringing a special gift for you." In that moment, I felt something warm settle in my chest. No matter what else happened, I knew I had at least one person who genuinely cared and believed in me. The week I spent preparing for that Christmas party was the most effort and heart I had ever poured into a family event. I wanted everything perfect, from the tiniest details to the overall atmosphere. First, I ordered food from a high-end restaurant specializing in traditional Christmas dishes. The menu included golden roasted turkey with crispy skin, aromatic stuffing with rosemary and sausage, silky mashed potatoes loaded with butter and cream, and a fresh Caesar salad topped with shaved Parmesan and crunchy croutons. I went with a classic pumpkin pie and a tall, multi-layered chocolate cake, covered in glossy dark ganache for dessert. But I didn't stop there. I hired a professional decorating team to transform my home into a true Christmas wonderland. They strung warm-colored LED lights across the living room, creating a cozy, romantic ambiance. The centerpiece was an 8-foot Christmas tree in the corner, dressed with shimmering silver and gold ornaments and elegant red velvet ribbons. Twinkling string lights wrapped around the window frames, giving off a soft starlight glow. On top of all that, I set aside a special budget to buy gifts for the kids in the family. Xbox games, fully accessorized Barbie sets, complex and fun Lego kits, and a few cuddly teddy bears. When I added everything up, the total came close to $3,000, which made me pause for a moment. But I saw it as a worthy investment in creating a beautiful memory with my family. I wanted them to know I had grown up, was financially capable, and had learned how to care for the people I loved. The night before the party, I stood in the living room, taking in everything I had put together. In that moment, my heart was hopeful that this would be a significant Christmas celebration. I had no idea that the real storm awaited me the next day. On the day of the Christmas party, I went over every detail one last time, from how the food was arranged, to adjusting the lighting to ensure everything felt just right. Everything was perfect and ready for the guests. The party was set to start at 5 p.m. By 4:30, I had wrapped up the final touches and was waiting there. No one had shown up at exactly 5 o'clock, the time I had shared with everyone. The food was laid out beautifully. The house was glowing with Christmas warmth, and yet it was utterly silent. A sense of unease began creeping into my mind, but I tried to stay calm. I picked up my phone and made a few calls to check in. The first call was to Aunt Sophia. She answered after 3 rings and responded in a rushed voice, "I'm on my way, just stuck in traffic." Then she hung up. Next, I reached Uncle Robert. He immediately said in an apologetic tone, "Naomi, I'll be there in about 15 minutes. Just finished up some work." The last call was to my mom. When I asked why no one had arrived yet, she casually replied, "We're on our way. Still early. Don't worry. They all said they were coming." So I let out a small sigh of relief and decided to wait a bit longer. By 5:30, not a single person had shown up. That's when I started to feel genuinely anxious. I called again one by one. But this time, something strange happened. No one picked up. That rising sense of worry turned into a cold wave inside me. Something wasn't right. A few minutes later, my phone rang, startling me. I looked down and saw my grandfather's name on the screen. I picked up right away. Before I could say much, he asked with a puzzled voice, "Naomi, the party already started. Why aren't you here yet?" That question hit me like lightning. I froze, completely confused. I quickly replied, "What do you mean, Grandpa? I'm still at home waiting for everyone." After a short silence, he asked again, this time sounding surprised, "Didn't you ask your mom to let everyone know the party would be held at Brian's place?" Hearing that, I shot back, stunned and entirely thrown off. "Are you serious? I never said that. I never asked her to do that." There was a pause on the other end before he finally responded. "I see. Now everything makes sense." After he hung up, the whole picture started to come together in my mind, and a flood of anger mixed with heartbreak began to rise inside me. While trying to process what had just happened in that call with my grandfather, my phone suddenly buzzed with a notification. I glanced down and saw Brian's name in my Instagram alerts. With trembling hands, I opened the app and saw the photo he had just posted. A grand Christmas party at his house. In the picture, I could see every single person I had invited. Aunt Sophia was laughing brightly. Uncle Robert had a glass of wine in hand, and all my cousins and their kids were there. Everyone looked happy, joyful, like they were exactly where they wanted to be. In that moment, a sickening wave of betrayal crashed over me, wiping out every ounce of hope I'd been holding on to. These people I had spent the entire week preparing for, buying gifts, ordering food, hiring decorators, had coldly and deliberately excluded me. Still reeling from what I saw, I called my mom, anger boiling inside me. The moment she answered, I asked bluntly, voice tight, "Why did you lie to Grandpa and tell him I moved the party to Brian's house?" She replied with a calm, almost cold tone, "What are you talking about? I never told him anything." I could feel the denial cutting deep, but I pressed on. "Fine. Then why was the party at Brian's place and no one thought to tell me?" That's when she said something that felt like a knife to the chest. "You should ask Brian that. Maybe ask yourself what you did so he wouldn't invite you." And with that, she hung up. Stunned and burning with rage, I immediately called Uncle Robert, hoping someone would tell the truth. When he picked up, I demanded, "Why did you lie to me?" He played dumb. "Lie to you about what?" I didn't hold back. "You're at Brian's party, so why did you tell me you were on your way to my place?" There was a pause. Then, with a nervous stammer, he said, "How do you know?" I stayed silent. I didn't know what to say to that kind of pathetic confession. After a few seconds, like he was trying to justify his betrayal, he added something that hit harder than I ever expected. "Look, you must understand, Brian's party was more important. He's working on a big investment deal, 6 months in, and it's set to bring in 200% returns. Those words were salt in an open wound. Before I could even respond, he kept going, his tone shifting into something preachy. If you want the family to respect and prioritize you, you need to be more like Brian. Think about what's good for the family. Then he hung up, leaving me in a silence that screamed. Hearing those words straight from Uncle Robert's mouth, I finally understood a harsh truth about my family. To them, the only thing that mattered was what you could give. If you brought them money, you were celebrated. If not, you were disposable, not worth their time or respect. While I was still drowning in anger and heartache after those brutal phone calls, I suddenly heard the sound of a car engine outside. I looked out the window and saw a taxi pulling up in front of the house. A familiar figure stepped out a moment later. It was my grandfather. I rushed to the door. He stood there holding a neatly wrapped gift box. His eyes were as warm as always, but I could sense the concern and sympathy behind them. The moment I saw him, all of the emotions I had held throughout the night came rushing to the surface. I quickly invited him in, my voice trembling, almost breaking into tears. For the first time that day, I felt like someone truly cared. When he stepped inside and saw the beautifully decorated room, full of light but empty of people, I felt an overwhelming sense of shame. He didn't say anything. He just gently placed his hand on my shoulder, offering silent comfort. After he settled into the sofa in the living room, I told him everything. The whole story. How my parents and relatives had deliberately shut me out. How they had lied to me. How they gathered at Brian's house behind my back. I told him about the fake phone calls, the Instagram photo, and the cruel things my mom and Uncle Robert had said. He didn't interrupt once. He listened quietly and patiently, his tired eyes watching me with deep understanding, nodding occasionally like he had already known. When I finished, he sat in silence for a moment. Then he placed his hand on my shoulder and said in a soft, heavy voice, "Naomi, I've lived long enough to see the true nature of people. What matters is that you've learned this lesson." Hearing those words, the storm inside me started to calm, strangely and unexpectedly. There was something about his voice, steady, honest, full of life's hard-earned wisdom, that felt like medicine for a broken soul. In that moment, I realized that my anger wasn't just about being betrayed. It was about the deep disappointment of facing the truth about the people I had trusted for many years. As we sat there in silence, it felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. My grandfather didn't judge me or try to comfort me with hollow words. He acknowledged the painful truth I had been forced to learn. And for the first time that day, I felt truly at peace. My grandfather and I returned to the dining area a little while later. Looking at all the untouched food still in their boxes, a sudden idea came to me. Instead of letting everything go to waste, why not give it to people who need it? I immediately called Marcus, a friend from college who now worked at a homeless outreach center in downtown Austin. As soon as I explained the situation, he agreed without hesitation to come pick up the food. 20 minutes later, Marcus showed up with 4 other volunteers. They helped load all the food and children's gifts into the center's van, but I didn't want to hand things off. I decided to go with them and give the gifts out myself. My grandfather insisted on joining, saying it was the perfect way to end a day like this. We went to the area under the I-35 bridge, where many homeless individuals had set up temporary shelters. Seeing the look of gratitude in their eyes as they received hot meals and gifts made something inside me settle. This right here, was what Christmas was really about. Sharing in love, not the fake performances my family had put on. One elderly man named Robert, same name as my uncle, but a completely different soul, gripped my hand tightly and said, "Ma'am, thank you. This is the best Christmas I've had in years." It was already 10 at night when we got back home. We were both exhausted, but there was a calmness in our hearts that hadn't been there before. Just as my grandfather was about to leave, he handed me the gift box he had brought earlier that evening. With a gentle, knowing smile, he said, "Go ahead, open it." Curious, I lifted the lid. Inside was a check. I had to look at it multiple times to ensure I wasn't imagining it. It was made out to Naomi Miller. The amount, $500,000. Completely stunned, I turned to him and asked, "Grandpa, why are you giving me this much money?" He placed a hand on my shoulder and spoke with warmth and gravity. "I never wanted to say it out loud, but I've seen everything you've gone through since you were little, the way they treated you. And more importantly, you deserve this more than anyone else in this family." Just before getting into the taxi, he looked at me with a serious expression and said, "In 3 days, 9:00 a.m. sharp. I want you at my house. I've got something significant to announce to the whole family." I nodded, promising I'd be there, already wondering what else my grandfather had in store. After I saw my grandfather off, I sat alone on the sofa in the living room, still bathed in the warm glow of Christmas lights. The $500,000 check was in my hands, and I stared at those numbers as if they could somehow explain why he had given me something so incredibly valuable. In the quiet, my thoughts drifted to all my memories with him, the moments when he stood by me while the rest of the world seemed to turn its back. I remembered vividly when I was 12 and my parents decided to take Brian on a summer trip to Hawaii, leaving me behind with the excuse that Brian deserved it more because he was better. While Brian showed off photos from Waikiki Beach, Grandpa quietly took me to Disneyland and spent an entire week making sure I had memories just as unforgettable as my brother's, if not better. Or when I was 16 and fell in love with coding, I asked my parents if I could join a programming course, but they shot me down without a second thought. That same week, Grandpa showed up at my door with a new laptop and paid for the course in full. I'll never forget what he told me. Don't let anyone stand in the way of your dreams. Those weekend visits to his house were always something special. We'd sit out on the porch and he would teach me the more profound lessons of life, how to understand people and stand tall for what I believe in. And he always encouraged me to keep going. His words still echo in my ears. "Naomi, I believe you're meant to do great things. Don't let anyone make you step back." Now, sitting there in the soft golden light, my heart filled with gratitude. My family may have betrayed me in the cruelest way possible, but I still had him, the one person who truly saw, believed in, and loved me without condition. And at that moment, I knew I wasn't alone in this world. The days following the Christmas party passed in an eerie silence from my family. Not a single one of them reached out. No phone calls, no texts, no apologies. It was as if nothing had happened, like their betrayal and humiliation of me were nothing more than a minor inconvenience. 3 days after the party, I drove to my grandfather's house on Saturday morning, arriving at 9:00 a.m., sharp as he'd asked. To my surprise, there were already several cars parked out front. Just as I had suspected, Grandpa had called a full family meeting. When I stepped inside, the entire family was already gathered. Brian sat on the sofa with an irritated look on his face. My parents sat close together, visibly anxious. Aunts, uncles, and cousins were all present, glancing around in confusion, unsure what would unfold. Someone else was also in the room, a man in his mid-50s wearing a crisp black suit, standing next to Grandpa with a large briefcase at his feet. He looked serious and professional. The moment I walked in, Grandpa said, "This is Bennett, my attorney. Today I have something important to share with the family." Attorney Bennett nodded politely at me, opened his case, and pulled out a thick folder. In the corner of the room, I noticed a video camera set up and recording. Once everyone was seated, Grandpa stood and looked around the room with a sternness I had never seen from him before. Then, in a clear, firm voice, he announced, "Today, I've gathered everyone to talk about the distribution of my estate." The room fell into a tense silence. A few seconds later, he continued, "Starting today, the 200-acre farm will be transferred to Naomi. My 15,000 shares at Heritage First National Bank will also go to Naomi. The main house and the rest of my assets will be passed on to her after I'm gone." As soon as he finished, Attorney Bennett took notes and documented everything professionally, while the camera continued to record every word. My grandfather's estate was worth nearly $3 million, including the farm, this house, stock investments, and liquid assets. The moment the announcement sank in, the room erupted. Uncle Robert, my dad's younger brother, stood up and snapped, "This isn't fair, Dad." Aunt Linda, my dad's sister, chimed in angrily, "How can you be so biased? We're your children too." Her son Luca added bitterly, "Grandpa, this is messed up." Brian shot up from the couch, his face red with fury. "This can't be real. I'm your grandson too." Even my father couldn't hold back. He shouted, "This is ridiculous. Why does Naomi get everything and the rest of us get nothing?" My mom glared at me with pure hatred in her eyes and said, "Naomi has done nothing for this family. Why would you give it all to her?" Amid the shouting, Grandpa calmly raised his hand, signaling everyone to be quiet. Then he said, his voice steady and full of finality, "Originally, I planned to divide everything equally among the 3 families. But 3 days ago, after seeing how all of you praised Brian and turned your backs on Naomi, I changed my mind." My dad exploded again. It was just a party. That's not a good enough reason. Aunt Linda, Uncle Robert, and some cousins agreed, calling the decision unfair. Grandpa let out a bitter smile and said, "Didn't Brian promise you all a 200% return on some big investment? You'll all be rich soon. Naomi has none of that." At that point, Brian's anger turned into desperation. "Grandpa, please cancel the will. Please give me the money. I'll invest it and triple your return." Grandpa let out a loud laugh and said sharply, "I'm not stupid, kid." Then he turned to Attorney Bennett and said, "Everything's been made clear. I have nothing more to say." Bennett nodded and confirmed that everything, the will, the transfers, the legal documentation, would be finalized within 1 week. The entire family stood and left in a storm of resentment. No one accepted Grandpa's decision. Before leaving, my parents, along with Aunt Linda and Uncle Robert, hurled one last threat. "If that's how you want to treat us, then don't expect any of us to be around when you need help." Without flinching, Grandpa replied, "I still have $1 million in personal funds. That's more than enough to pay for private care and medical services. I won't need anything from any of you." And with that, they all left in bitter silence, leaving just Grandpa and me in a quiet house. The house fell into a heavy silence after the door closed and the last car engine faded into the distance. It was just Grandpa and me, sitting across from each other in the living room. I sat quietly, trying to process everything that had just happened. A $3 million estate, the 200-acre farm, the bank shares, all now belonged to me. It was a life-altering moment I never could have imagined. Finally, I broke the silence. "Grandpa, I don't know what to say. Thank you. Thank you so much." Then I asked the question that had been in my mind all morning. "Can I ask you something? What was the real reason you decided to leave everything to me? I know it wasn't just because of the Christmas party." He looked at me and smiled gently, his eyes warm and full of affection. He didn't launch into a long explanation or list the years of things he'd witnessed or the countless moments I thought had gone unnoticed. He said, "Because you deserve it." That short answer held everything. All the love, trust, and pride he'd carried for me through the years. In the days following the reading of the will, my life quickly spiraled into chaos as my relatives began showing up one by one, each with a desperate plea. Aunt Linda was the first to appear at my doorstep. When I opened the door, she stood there with red, puffy eyes and said in a pleading voice, "Naomi, I need your help. I need $25,000 for my husband's heart surgery. It's urgent. He needs it to survive." A few days later, Uncle Robert came by. Sitting in my living room, he looked at me with a serious expression and said, "Naomi, I'm hoping you can help with $10,000 for Caleb's next college semester." Then came the cousins, one after another. One needed money to fix a leaking roof. Another said their car had broken down and they needed help buying a new one. Each story came with what seemed like a legitimate and pressing need. But the most shocking part wasn't their sudden interest in me. It was a complete shift in attitude from my parents. Out of nowhere, my mom started calling me every day, asking how I was doing, checking on my health, and talking to me in a sweet, gentle tone I had never heard from her before. My dad kept inviting me over for dinner, saying things like, "We're still family. We need to reconnect. Put all these misunderstandings behind us." But beneath every word, I could sense the real motive. A slow, careful attempt to convince me to share the inheritance. Or better yet, give it back altogether. I stood firm to each request. I said no calmly, clearly, and without hesitation. Because after everything, I had finally learned how to say no to the people who had hurt me. Unable to endure the constant intrusion from my relatives any longer, I made a firm decision 3 months ago. I sold my house and moved to a place where none of them could find me. I sold my old home for $380,000. With that money, combined with what Grandpa had given me, I was able to purchase a high-end condo worth $710,000 in East Austin, one of the most secure areas in the city. My new place sits on the 15th floor, featuring 2 spacious bedrooms and a breathtaking view of the Colorado River. Most importantly, the building has state-of-the-art security, key card access, on-site guards, and surveillance cameras covering every corner. No one gets in without my permission. To entirely cut ties, I changed my phone number, updated my email, and deleted all my social media accounts. I didn't want a single thread connecting me to the chaos I had left behind. When I received the keys, I invited Grandpa to see the place. He spent nearly an hour walking through the rooms, admiring the open living space, and stepping onto the balcony to take in the view. As we stood there overlooking the city in the soft afternoon light, he placed his hand on my shoulder and said with pride, "You did well. I'm glad you took the step to walk away from them." Hearing those words, I knew I had made the right choice, and for the first time, I felt like I had a truly mind space, a home where I could live in peace, free from the people I once called family. After I made the changes to my living situation and cut off all communication, the harassment from my relatives finally stopped. Life became peaceful. I could fully focus on work and enjoy the private space I had built for myself. But that peace was shattered a month ago. It was a regular afternoon at the office when the receptionist called and told me a group of people was waiting for me in the lobby. When I went downstairs, I saw Aunt Linda, Uncle Robert, and their son and daughter standing there looking anxious and visibly upset. I did not want to cause a scene at work, so I agreed to meet them at the Starbucks next to the building. As soon as we sat down, Aunt Linda launched into a rant, her voice sharp with anger and desperation. Brian had convinced them to invest in a new cryptocurrency called Family Coin, promising massive returns of up to 300% in 6 months. Brian had introduced himself as the official advisor for the project, using the family name and exaggerated stories of past success, many of which had been inflated by our parents, to gain their trust. His influence was so strong that 4 branches of the extended family, including Aunt Linda's and Uncle Robert's, ended up pouring in a combined total of $1.6 million. Uncle Robert explained that 2 months into the investment, the Family Coin website disappeared. Brian stopped responding to calls, deleted all his social media accounts, and even moved out of the apartment where they knew he lived. But what shocked me most wasn't the scam, it was their demand. Instead of trying to contact Brian or going to the police, they came to me demanding that I repay the money on his behalf with the excuse, "You're Brian's sister. That makes you responsible for what he did." Hearing that, I was torn between rage and disbelief at its absurdity. I stood up, paid for my coffee, and looked at them with a cold, steady voice. "Let me clarify. If you come to me again about this, I'll take you to court. I have nothing to do with what Brian did." Immediately, they shifted tactics. Uncle Robert said, "Didn't Grandpa give you over $3 million? You should be splitting that up." Aunt Linda jumped in. "Please, Naomi, we're about to lose our house to the bank." They kept pushing, trying to guilt me, beg, and reason, but none of it worked. I turned around and walked straight out of Starbucks without looking back. At that moment, I knew cutting ties with the family was the right decision. 2 days after that meeting at the coffee shop, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. When I answered, I immediately recognized the voice I'd been trying to avoid for months. "Naomi, it's your mother," she said. Her voice sounded more tired and anxious than usual. Without any greeting or small talk, she jumped straight to the point. "I need you to help with $300,000 to cover the mortgage. The bank is about to seize the house." When I asked for details, she reluctantly admitted the painful truth. She and my father had taken out a mortgage on their house, $300,000 in cash, and handed all of it to Brian to invest in the Family Coin project. They were on the verge of losing their home with no way to pay it back. After hearing everything, I let out a cold laugh and replied, "I'll make you an offer. I'm willing to buy the house for $500,000. If you agree, sell it to me, but I'm not handing over $300K to bail you out." Hearing that, my mother snapped, "You ungrateful brat, I gave birth to you." I stayed calm and responded, "That's true, but that doesn't mean I'm responsible for cleaning up your mistakes." I drove to Grandpa's house to tell him about the evening call. He listened without surprise and then told me something that made everything clearer. The rest of the family had also gone to him, trying to pressure him into changing the will and demanding that he help them out of their financial mess. But Grandpa had stood his ground. He told them he wouldn't change a word, and when they wouldn't leave, he calmly called the police and had them removed. A week after the first call, my phone rang again. Same number my parents had been using. My father's voice sounded more composed this time, like he had considered my offer. As soon as I picked up, he spoke in a calm, rehearsed tone. "Naomi, your mother and I agree to sell the house to you for $500,000, just like you said." But almost immediately, he added a condition. "However, we want to keep living in the house. We've been here for years. We can't just leave." I couldn't help but feel amused by how calculated it all was. They wanted the money to pay off the bank, yet also expected to keep the house, a deal that benefited them entirely. After a brief pause, I responded calmly. My current offer is $450,000. You want to stay? Fine. $3,000 a month in rent. That number struck a nerve. My father lost his temper and yelled, "Last week you said 500. Why are you changing it now?" I let out a small laugh and replied with quiet confidence, "This is business, Dad. You missed your chance last week. And let me be clear, if you call me a third time about this, the offer drops to 400 flat." He hung up immediately, likely boiling with anger. I sat back, knowing the next call would come. And soon, sure enough, 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time, his voice was different, softer, less sure. In a pleading tone, he said, "Naomi, your mother and I want to renegotiate for $470,000. Would you take it?" Then he added, "We'll move out once the paperwork is done. We can't afford $3,000 in rent." That offer told me everything I needed to know. I was getting the house at a fair price, and I wouldn't have to deal with them living there or causing problems. Without hesitation, I answered, "Deal, I accept." And just like that, after all those years of being mistreated, I finally learned how to stand my ground, negotiate, and protect what was mine. Transferring the house from my parents to my name is still underway. My attorney is handling all the legal paperwork, and everything is expected to be finalized within the next 2 weeks. My parents have already begun packing, preparing to move into a smaller apartment they can afford. As for Brian, he's finally facing the consequences of his actions after losing all the money in the family coin scam. Aunt Linda and Uncle Robert reported him to the police. He was arrested 2 weeks ago and is now awaiting trial on financial fraud charges. Ironically, they also came to me asking if I would buy their house to help them out of their situation. Needless to say, I declined. We devised something meaningful regarding the 200-acre ranch my grandfather transferred to me. We're leasing the land, and with the income, Grandpa and I decided to establish a scholarship fund for underprivileged students. It's our way of creating something truly positive for the community. Even though my life has changed completely, I still keep my weekend routine visiting Grandpa. Those quiet afternoons on his porch, sipping coffee and talking about life, have become the most treasured part of my week. He's still healthy, sharp-minded, and most importantly, he supports every decision I've made. Looking back on this journey, I don't regret a choice. It was right to cut ties with my family, move homes, and stand firm against their unreasonable demands. I feel respected and in complete control of my future for the first time. If there's one piece of advice I can give anyone listening to this story, it's this. Don't let family ties close your eyes to reality. The people who genuinely love you will never deliberately hurt or take advantage of your kindness. Your assets, your time, energy, and money result from your hard work. Protect them from those who only take and never give. Some people may think I was too harsh or selfish for how I treated my family, but what do you think? Was I being greedy? I genuinely want to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below this story, and if this story touched you in any way, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share it. Also, let me know where you're listening from. I'd love to know how far this story has reached. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.